Shabbat Shalom and welcome everyone. Today I really hope to deliver this message with the Ruach and the help of the Father. There is many things as I sit back and listen that we go through and we have a part of our life and a part of what's going on with us. And our thoughts are not His thoughts. And that's what I wanted to share today, that our thoughts and our ways are just not His ways. And many times when we think everything's going right, or we think everything's going terribly wrong, is what happens. So I will start off with that. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, declares Yahweh. For the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So He tells us clearly of what's going on and what's happening here and what we are a part of. Can you see what I have up? Did I share that or
not yet?
No. Okay.
Maybe you need permission. No, you can go ahead.
Okay. All right. We good now?
Good.
All right. Yeah, I just noticed that. All right. So but as I heard everyone speaking today, and I ain't going to say names or anything, but what we see in life and what goes on in life is usually not our plans. Divorces, if you know my background, being in the military, I planned many times to do different things, different ways, and I thought my thoughts and my ways would be a lot better than what I had to deal with. But as you know, what goes on in life is what goes on. But people that go to incarceration, people that have a divorce, people that have loved ones die, all these things we would probably not sign up for. We would probably not be like, hey, sign me up for this and I will gladly go. But when we say, just like in the liturgy, that I will go, send me, that's pretty much saying I will take that discipleship. I will restore your kingdom. You know, here in the New Earth Restoration, we believe that we are restoring as the Essenes, as those who are called out to do something different. And there's nothing wrong with being peculiar. You know, I believe a lot of us are set apart, and that peculiar separates us. It lets us know that His thoughts, our ways, and what's going on are not exactly the worldly ways. For my grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith of Elohim has distributed to each of you. Romans 12:3. We see many times that even at, and I would just use myself as an example, even at our best, right? At my best, I'm praying for people, they're being healed, everything's going great. I'm sent here, I'm going there. Wow. But if we're not careful, even those thoughts and those times, there becomes a ignorance, if you will, and an arrogance of what the person is doing. And it's never the flesh. It's always the Ruach. But sometimes we can see our thoughts and our plans will do something totally different to us. And just like you said, Dr. Jackson, earlier, we have an enemy and we're fighting the enemy. We're not fighting against flesh and blood, whether it's divorce, someone passing on, whatever goes on in that life, or this life, I should say. We have an enemy, and he's very good at it if we really know what we're talking about. He knows the little shortcuts and the byways and the short ways to get us. He knows our emotions. He knows and has studied us, if you will, to the point of going to a family member and having a family member just disemboweling you, if you will, just making you feel terrible about your life and your decisions and everything, and even after you've been back on top for a while. So with all that being said, we need to go with Yahweh and His thoughts. And how do we do that? Well, of course, His Word. And just like we're doing here, that we encourage each other, we help one another, we pray for one another, and we get into His Word and study it and do what He says to do. Matthew 6:25, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? We see the world and the ways of the world. They love to have the designer jeans, the designer coats, the Gucci purses, all these different things. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a good lifestyle, but when we see what it becomes and what it comes down to, almost anything can distract us from the truth, whether it's riches or poorness. When you have too much, you can sometimes forget, just like he says, just like all of Israel, we sometimes forget. We sometimes don't think we need the Creator. We have money, we have this, we have that. What do we have need of? But he says we're naked, we're poor, we're destitute. And a lot of times we blindly believe we're okay. And that gets us in much, much trouble. And many times I believe he lets these things happen and lets the enemy come in and kick us in the side, if you will, because he wants us to not perish. It's not his will that any shall perish. Let the wicked forsake their ways and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them turn unto Yahweh, and he will have mercy on them, and to our Elohim, for he will freely pardon. Many times we come to him and we think because of the righteousness, right? We come and we say, well, I wear this, I do that, I do this, I keep the Sabbath. And we try to stack this up and use it as a playing card, if you will, or I have, right? You come and you say, well, look, I've done all this, therefore you must answer this prayer, this must happen this way. And as children, which we're supposed to be, but not the children who have the little anger tantrum fits that want everything their way. But I found myself to be right in that line as well, that when we want it our way, when we pray and we see these miracles and we see these things happen and we see all these great, glorious things happen for others, sometimes when it doesn't happen our way, whether it be divorce, death of anyone, right? A lot of times we seem to go down a slippery path and go into something that if he didn't hear me on this, then why won't he hear me on this? And before we know it, we can come to a dark place. We can come to a terrible place of anger, hostility, so much going on that becomes a problem. And as far as even divorcing and things like that, like we had spoke of, any anger, any hostility, it always hurts, and usually generational, just like we hear generational curses. And it was awesome that we talked about the water earlier. I've seen that before, and you can sit there and literally say, I love you. And plants as well. You can do it, have a plant and walk by every morning for like a month and tell a plant, I love you, and have another plant and tell it, I hate you. And in 30 days, that other plant usually turns into a discreated state. It starts withering, it starts looking bad just from words. So words mean things, right? A lot of the times we don't realize, and I think that's what we have in so much divorce race, so much of the divorce and the tearing down of the family, but the enemy knows how to destroy us, how to destroy and come against the kingdom. Adam and Eve going forth, having children, be fruitful and multiply. All these are the kingdom things. All these are the restoration things, I believe. I would submit to you that is the perfect picture of the kingdom and even into the wedding supper of how and what he wants us to be. For whatever reason, these thoughts can be terrible. And usually they start with little things. It's funny, the other night I was sitting there thinking about this. And most people, and being from military background, there's a lot of adultery, there's a lot of cheating, there's a lot of times the guys go away and things happen. And usually it doesn't happen overnight, right? Usually you don't go to the supermarket and you're looking at grapes and everybody runs off and commits adultery. No, usually it's a look, it's a glance, it's this, but that's why we have the rules and why he says, don't do these things, don't do these things. The modesty, all this goes into play, especially when we become apart. So with all this in what should be our thoughts is what we should be looking forward to. And when we get away from those thoughts or get into our own thoughts, and they can be the most righteous thoughts in the world, But those thoughts can also be turned against us if we're not careful. When we see people healed, when we see the great, glorious things, sometimes we can become a baby and say, well, I want it my way, and I want it this way. But as we see, his plans and his thoughts are not ours. And sometimes, as we see down the road, that divorce was the best thing in your life. That someone passing away, as terrible as it seems, brings life. Just like we see the new beginning of the year, the Passover season, the month of Abib. It's all about, to me, life. It's all about, I know it's about Passover, don't get me wrong, but Yeshua gave his life and he came back to life that we could have life and we could have more abundant life. And if you see and read them disciples, it's hard for me to understand to a point how they didn't understand when he told them plainly. He told them plainly, I'm going to be raised up. He told them plainly he was going to die. He just come out and said it a few times, and they did not understand. They was looking for the conquering king. But I would submit that's what I look for a lot of times. That's what we look for, I think, and we get miscombobulated, if that's the right word. We want to be the conquering king. We want to bring all the people in, and as you said earlier, we want to save everybody. We want to get everybody, put them on the pulpit, put them down and repent, and that's not our job, really. Our job is just like we see what the Messiah did. Preach his word, tell his word, do what we can, do the best we can, but ultimately, if we're honest, we're fighting with ourselves, no matter where we are. And this week, it showed me so much different. It's amazing how much that he will kick you in the ribs and get you back to where he wants you to be, and you think you ain't that bad. But each one of us are special. And I found out from when I came out being a Pentecostal preacher and come into all this, every soul matters. And no matter how long I've been doing this, or how much I know, or how much Hebrew and how much Torah scrolls, or every soul matters. There is not a soul around me that is not more, there's no importance, I would say. I'm not more important than this soul here. And that was just an amazing mirror that I seen this week, that talking and sharing and he does not care really of how much I put into and what I've done. As what he cares is my soul and my eternity, and the same thing for the one next to me. And there is no differentiation I see in that. Yes, we all have work to do, and I believe that work, just like Brother John was saying, those 6 days of work and those working, but it also can be working for the kingdom, I believe. It can also be, as we see the Messiah sent him out and said, don't take anything, go into who you go into, and have them bring you in. So all that is a part of the kingdom. It's all a part of what we're doing. But when we get ourselves higher than what we think we can ride the slide into heaven, right? We're like, hey, I've done all this, and that is everything. Excuse me, I shut that off earlier. I will read the verse here that I had, the reason why I turned this silly thing on. Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known unto Yahweh, and the peace of Elohim, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. All these times and all these desperation things, we see things with the government, we see things with our family, we see things with our wives, our husbands, our children, our brothers, our sisters. But we know that the Messiah said that we are going to have these problems. And we know the world is going to hate us. And if our brother, our dad, our mom, whomever is a part of the world, then of course they're going to hate us. It's not no fun, trust me. It's not easy for your brother or your family, your dad or someone to tell you how off they think you are, and sit back and watch you not put up Christmas trees and do Sukkot and do all these things, and then turn around and say, oh, well, you best not lose your religion. and all these things of, they know where you are, they can see where you're at, they can see the desperation that you become, but there ain't a whole lot of help. I think a lot of times the world wants you to fall on your face, and they're a part of the enemy's kingdom, and they want you to do terrible, bad things, and then they can sit back and laugh, and of course the enemy is a part of that as well. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at young women. This is one of the biggest things that we can see as well, and I would say as far as young women looking at men, the modesty and the things that go on. In the perfect world, we have that perfect world. But in this world, we don't have that perfect world. We have lustful thoughts. We have terrible things. We go to the supermarket, and if you've been anywhere, you can see a lot of people don't like clothes anymore. And therefore, those thoughts and those things can come about. We are not to act on them, and that's not to make an excuse, right? We don't say, oh, well, I have eyes, and I've heard even other preachers say, well, I'm not blind, and all these things of that sort. But those thoughts and those plans and those judgments can lead to terrible, horrible actions. And some people are really sorry of those horrible, terrible actions. And sometimes you can be persuaded into doing things. And I'm not condoning anything. I'm saying that sometimes when you go to places, your intentions are to do something, right? I've been to places and intended on buying a vehicle or buying a ring or buying something, and the persuasion of, hey, this is easier, this is better, this will work out better for you, hey, why not? You change your thoughts and you change what you would do because of that situation. Now, whether it's bad or good, that all comes out in the wash. But if you really had the thoughts, and if we're really walking with Yahweh, if we're really being led by the Ruach, what I've always found is your true thoughts and your true actions always should go first. If he changed them, if you feel compelled to be changed, then you let that happen. And this is in marriage and divorce and all these things as well. I would submit to you that pray and give it to him, because there's usually family members, there's usually things in there, and there's usually things that hostility, and the ultimate thing again is loving kindness, the shalom of it all, if you will. Not to let the children, even if there is something that goes on or has to happen or you can't deal with it, right? As men, I know there's a lot of men, we're made that way. I'm made that way, I should say. We want one wife. We want one, and that's our family. But think about how Abba feels about that. I think that he feels the same way. He wants us to be his children, and he wants to show us, and he does show us such grace and love and compassion and mercy. And sometimes we dish that out the wrong way. We say, well, mama and daddy, and we see the results of that, and people that hate their children or people that hate their mom and dad because of all those situations going on. So we should do our best to do our diligence in those situations, and remember that those families and those loving kindness means so much. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at young women. Reversing up 1 Corinthians 3:18. Do not deceive yourselves that any of you think you're wise by the standards of this age. You should become fools so you become wise. Many times when I thought I was really doing good, I have found this to be a truth. I've found that, again, being at the hospital and having people healed and watching people and confessing and having all this, and I'm all praising to Yahweh. I know a lot of times when I say this, people are like, oh, that guy there. But it's all praise to Yahweh. It's all giving him thanks of what he has done. I am just the little guy that gets to carry the note and tell them about my Savior, about Yeshua. It's not anything special. And it's sometimes, if you know me, I would not do that. I would be on my boat in the Bahamas, sitting back doing scuba diving things, right? But when he sends you, he wants you to do. And last time I seen when he sent, go to Nineveh, it wasn't a question mark. It wasn't an A, B, and C thing. It was, you go to Nineveh. And we know the story of that, right? His thoughts and his plans was destroy those people. They're deserving. They're pagans. They're this. They're that. I believe his words were, I knew you was going to save them. So he knew from the beginning that Yahweh was going to save those people, that he was going, and that's why he sent them. And that's where, again, I believe every soul comes in. Are we going to save the world? Absolutely not. When I walk out here, or you walk out here, or Brother John, or Joshua Paul, when we go out, we're not going to have drones of people saying this and saying, oh, restore me, oh, and help me. But those one souls that matter. And is it not written that all heaven rejoices over one soul? That is a plan, that is a thought that sometimes I don't think we can fathom. We're worried about the numbers and how many YouTubes and how many this, but he's worried about that one soul. Those 99 are great, and hopefully we're in that 99, right? He's not too concerned about you and me and everybody else here. He's worried about those ones that are lost, those ones who are out there, whether it be in prison or about to go to prison or about to jump off a bridge or to do some terrible thoughts because they don't think they matter. They don't think anything matters. And maybe they was in church their whole life. And maybe they was a part of this group or that group or whatever their whole time. And they found out that thought, that plan was not the way that they thought it was going to go. Do not deceive yourselves. If any of you think you are wise by the standards of this age, you shall become fools, that you shall become wise. A lot of times there's nothing like that being felt so low. So how do I get to this? This is not me. This is not a part of me. But I think when we come to that is we understand that's not where he wants us to be. He wants us to be up in the righteous realms and to be like Yeshua. So many times I see people and they say, well, I come and I put it all at the stake and I give it all to Jesus and I did all this and I did all that. But they don't realize that this life is a battle and we're battling against the flesh and blood. And so it's written that every day can be a very vigorous battle. It can be victory or it can be a non-victory. And a lot of times, sadly, that is our thoughts and our plans. If we wake up, just like, again, the water and the plants, and we say, oh, today's going to be terrible, it's probably going to be bad. If we get up and we say, hey, today I'm going to make it the best I can do, I'm going to do what I can, and we put a lot of that back upon the Messiah, upon his word, and we're standing on his word, because as we see, our thoughts and our plans, although they may be great, are usually unrighteous rags, right? They're minstrel rags. They're the righteousness and the things of what we do is just not, we miss the mark so many times. And it's sad to look and see those. But when we really are doing it correctly and we're really listening and we're really seeing and walking like the Messiah, that's where people's heads turn. That's where we see and we feel at our best. And we can feel that lighten load. When we're doing the things of our ways, it's a heavy load, it's a heavy burden, but he says his is not heavy. His is not that way. Proverbs 14:12, there's a way that appears to be right, but the end leads to death. And again, I think we all know this, and if we don't, to study and prove yourself worthy of that, because we can walk our life through and do things, eat things, and live the way we want to, and it's going to lead to death, and the eternal is what matters. What we're putting our treasures upon and what the next step is everything. Our next job, if you will, our next step. If we don't know this, we're probably going to have a lot of problems with that. And we see that we're going to do the feast, even in the eternal kingdom, if you will, right? So in that, if we don't have this part straight, we're going to have a lot of problems with the other part. And if we're not happy with it now, what's going to change? What our thoughts and our plans are not going to change because some magical poof, I don't believe. I believe that he is looking for us to change our hearts and our minds and to submit ourselves. Obedience is better than sacrifice, to be obedient to his word and to understand his word and to grow in his word. How do you do that? You got to get in his word, right? You got to get into it. You got to study it and prove yourself worthy. The enemy knows if you don't have his word, your thoughts and your plans are eventually going to be horrendous, and you're going to be on the left side, right side, back and forth, and like that unstable water, right? The water that just one day, just keep using that illustration. It's kind of unstable if you can tell it to love and it does one thing, and you tell it to hate and it does another. So you have the thoughts and the process and the words to do that. But he also says, behold, in your mouth is life and death. So all this goes together amazingly of how we can use those thoughts and use his plans and know his plans as opposed to ours. Example, Sabbath day. Sabbath day, I want to do what I want to do. I want to go out, I want to go fish, I want to go jet ski, and I want to do whatever I want to do because it's Sabbath day. Technically, I can take my day and do the rest day I want to do, right? Or I can come and say, okay, he says we're supposed to fellowship together. Okay, well, I don't have a fellowship. Well, that's why we have the New Earth Restoration. That's why we're here, right? So we can complete and do what he says to do. We can come together and restore each other and hopefully restore all those watching. Those who may watch this in 6 months, next month, or a year, and come and say, wow, that is exactly my life. My plans for my life was messed up, and I thought I had it figured out. I thought this marriage, I thought this, and I thought that. And those plans just turned upside down and become the horrific thing ever. And I would also submit to you that's where I see a lot of marriages and problems. People don't talk about religion. They talk about lust. They talk about things before they get to the next step. And that can be horrific, as I've seen. Someone's a Catholic, someone's a Baptist, and then they get married and they have a kid. And now we have a battle of, we're going to Catholic church, we're going to Baptist church. Which were we doing? And it becomes a whole big deal as opposed to, hey, what do you believe? Do you keep the Sabbath? Do you keep this? Are you kosher? Are you unclean? What? And will you ever be a part of that? Because it matters down the road in the plans and in what comes into it. I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Master, Yeshua HaMashiach, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. Now, if you've looked around, that is a big deal, if you will, and it will get you in quite the pickle. Joke. But really, if you're not careful, even in the religious realms, if you will, the divisions, churches split because this one believes this one believes that, and they split and they have these divisions among them. And we know that shouldn't be. And I believe we do a really good job of that here, that we have the university and diversity, that we can not always see eye to eye, but we can give ourselves time, because it all is a matter of time. Just because we see something this way doesn't mean that you'll see that this way today. It may take 6 months, it may take a year, you may never ever see it that way. But hopefully, if we're all working for the kingdom in the kingdom, and we all agree that Yeshua is the Messiah, we all agree that we're doing our best, then eventually it should come to be us unified on every level, I would submit to you. Going on. For who knows a person's thoughts except their own spirit within them? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of Elohim except the Ruach of Elohim. And this is where I believe that we strive to be. This is where I try to be, especially when I'm praying and talking and going to places. I let the Ruach dictate of what should happen. And that is not an easy thing. It seems, it's real easy to say that. But when you're going down the road and you feel like you should turn left and your GPS is saying go right, who are you going to listen to? Well, the Ruach says go this way. And it's not always a thundering lightning bolt that smacks the back of your car and tells you to do this. Just make a left. And I've run into people doing that, and just that still small voice listening and going in that direction. And it's become an amazing thing as opposed to even fighting against it. I've been to places where I wanted to go to Walmart. I want to go and do this. I want to go and do that. And I had my plans for the day. But in amongst those plans, let's go over here. Let's just ride a little farther. Let's just go. And I've come to learn that I'm looking now. I'm looking out. My way, I still want to say, I got to go get this done. But it's just one of those things that patience and a verb type thing, right? So a lot of times that can come into play as well. I'll say it one more time. For who knows a person's thoughts except their own spirit within them? In the same way, no one knows that the thoughts of Elohim except the spirit. So when we learn that our ways are not always his ways, and when we learn what we're looking at and what we're doing, right? Just like we go over the verses or we go over these things, if we see looking or speaking to someone is our personal vendetta, right? And we can get into those places where we're so busy trying to save someone that we're missing the one on the right that needs to hear it, and we're trying to proselyte this guy to the right. You know, our personal plan is, I seen something in this person and I really think they're this, where the person over here that's being quiet and still is listening and they're begging for us to speak to them or to share something with them. But it's just the nature. The flesh is just so warring against the Ruach, sadly. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet and be steadfast in all your ways. And this is every day, every time we do things, that I believe the better we get, the more we listen, the more that we have the scripture. It has to be the word. I think we've all seen preachers, pastors, teachers, YouTubers, everybody that come up with these, different thoughts and different plans, and people catch on to them and they run with them because, the rapture theories and this different thing and what they have come. But it doesn't take a whole lot of study, and it doesn't take a scholar and a Hebrew. It doesn't take a whole lot to prove those things not to be truth. But we can take those plans and take those thoughts and say, well, yeah, that's my religion. That's what I do. The Pentecostal faith in itself, me coming up there, I think I have a right to talk about that, as they believe they came from that Acts 2:38, which undoubtedly. But the Pentecostal faith actually came in the 1900s, right? So stemming off of that and knowing the truth and the facts of the matter means a lot. But we all come from the old days, if you will. We all come and want to be restored into the old paths and the old ways. For the word of Elohim is alive and active. And this is what we have to understand too. And a lot of people, I believe, don't understand that it's alive and active. This message can go out and touch one person or it can touch many. It's all up to the Father and what he says. But he also promises it will not go and come back void. That water will go and it will water that seed of whomever he wishes. Of course, we want to be our dad, our mom, our brother, our this, our that, our family members. But so many times I found when we're doing that, we're missing what he has us to do. And what we are doing is a different plan and a different thought. Because just like the Messiah said, in our towns, in our families, we're not, and I'm paraphrasing it, but we're not going to be heard, right? No prophet is accepted in his own town. That's the word. And from going off of that, it's hard for your dad, your mom, your brother to see you in that light because they know what you did. If you stole a candy bar when you was 5, when you did this when you was 3, if you did this when you was 12, you ran off with some shoes, you threw something at them. They remember those things and they're like, well, come on, I know who you really are. They can't sometimes see past that. And when somebody else comes in that they have nothing they can throw upon. And yes, that's a part of the enemy. Of course, the enemy's always before him trying to proclaim those things. But when someone comes in that they don't know those things about and says, this is the truth, the life, and the way, they can't use those weapons against them, right? So the word of Elohim is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates, even dividing the soul and the spirit, the joints and the marrow, and it judges the thoughts and the attitudes of the heart. And that is something right there. That is really something to know that he's judging our thoughts. He's judging those and what we do and what we're saying and how we act. And sometimes, sadly, it's after he judges those thoughts that we find out that we have just fell on our face, that we have just looked like an idiot, if you will. We have just looked terrible. And there's nothing like someone telling you that, right? There's nothing like somebody, but Yahweh bless the people that are bold and will not sugarcoat it, right? I've always said, if you want something sugar-coated, you probably need to go buy some donuts, because he never wanted us to be sugar-coated or watered down. And the Messiah never said, oh, that's okay. He never said, you can do it your way. He never said, your plans are going to be fine. He never told us that that's going to work out. The scriptures always tell us how it's going to work out. And it's usually to our very demise when we think it's going to be something better. A person may think their own ways are right, but Yahweh weighs the heart. Proverbs 21:2, and I know probably everyone here knows and has heard, but he knows my heart. He knows your heart, and the scriptures say it is a wicked and deviseful thing. So the things that we know, we have to know who we are, and we have to know ultimately we're fighting against the flesh, and we're fighting against what the flesh wants. And the flesh wants what it wants to eat, it wants what it wants to drink, it wants all those things, and whatever we've fed it in the past, it has learned this is what it wants or it doesn't. But as I've learned, the more that we stay away from those things, the more the flesh even doesn't like those things as well. There are certain things, certain smells, certain things that I used to love that now are not pleasing. It's not a pleasing aroma, right? Those things, bacon in the morning used to jump up and run and be like, wow. But now it's like, wow, that's a terrible smell. You can smell it from other restaurants. You can smell it from other places. And it's just amazing to me of how your body kind of resets and restores itself, being left into what he created to be. You have searched me, O Yahweh, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. Psalms 139:1-2. If he knows our thoughts, and he is Abba, our Father, what I've come to understand is we want him to look down and say, that is my son, that is my daughter. I'm very well pleased in them. And many times I think we know, if we're honest, that he's not pleased with us. But what we do with these things and how we treat our anger and how we treat our siblings, our even exes, right? So many times what we find that love and that compassion is there. And he says, forgive those. And there's nothing like forgiving someone that you know was wrong. You can prove was wrong. You know they have done horrible, horrific things and said them. But when you pray, you forgive them. We give that and leave it on the altar. And we give that all to the Creator himself and say, Father, and that's, to me, another hurdle. It's another thing that getting to, because at certain times, especially when it happens, I'm sure we don't want to pray that prayer. We're praying the opposite of that prayer. We're praying fire from heaven, damnation, everything but the shalom and the happiness and the things that we should know better than praying, right? Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, these are the things that we think about. These are the things that we're supposed to have on our mind. This is what brings us to that potted plant. This is what brings us to that ice. This is what brings us to the perfect water that others will thirst for and they will want to have. When they see people cutting people off and flipping people off and cussing them out and doing all that, it's no different than the next person. But when we truly set the bar higher, and no matter where we are, we never stop the bar. We never say, okay, so I've learned how to put this on. I've learned how to do this. I've learned how to be a public this. That we're always saying, Father, I know you're testing me. I know you're trying me. Where do you want me to be? And what I've found, this is a lifelong journey. It's not a one and done. It's not a, I'm sorry, it's over. Every day we are getting closer, or should be getting closer to the Father. And within that, we learn more of his ways. Will we learn them all? No, because it says we won't. Will we understand why this one died and why that one's alive? Why this divorce happened? Why this person that you gave your life to and you would die for went and committed adultery or went and did these? No. But how do we know that isn't something better down the road? There's many people I've seen divorced and have a far better life today than they ever would have had with that person that they was trying to have a family with. And that's just the way it is, right? It's just the way the cookie crumbles, if you will, if I could throw that in there. So you ask, what have we said against you? You have said it is futile to serve Elohim. What do we gain by carrying on his requirements and going about like mourners before Yahweh Almighty? But now we call the arrogant blessed. Certainly evildoers prosper. And even when they put Elohim to the test, they get away with it. Then those who feared Yahweh talked with each other, and Yahweh listened and heard. A scroll of remembrance was written in his presence concerning those who feared Yahweh and honored his name. So we can see clearly, and I think we do, when we see all these things happening, and we can see people that get away with murder, literally. They get away with doing things that isn't right. And it's easy for us to take our thoughts and go right into that, what the verse says. But they got away with it, but they did this, but they're doing that, and I've kept the Sabbath all these years. I've been teaching, I've been doing your will, I've went to the places, I've done all these. And what's up with that, right? How come this person ain't burning to the ground? How come they're... But that is not his will or his way. It's not his will that any should perish. And what I found, a lot of these people that live these long lives, they have a longer time. How can they justify go in front of Yahweh at 90 years old, 100 years old, and say, oh, I never heard your word. I never heard this. I never heard that. That's not justice, right? They have had time after time after time to hear the word, to hear the message, and to come into the fold, to come and be restored. In closing, I'll do two more and close it out. Commit unto Yahweh whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. And that's what it's all about. Putting our plans and our life into his hands and understanding his ways and his thoughts, no matter what we think. And it is not easy. And if you know me and you know my life and you know what I'm talking about, I'm not whistling Dixie here. I'm telling you, there's many things that's happened in my life that I would have never planned, I would have never thought, I would have never been a part of if it was up to me. And I think you realize that and know that if you know me. But with all that being said, this chapter of my life hopefully will be a better chapter, and to get closer to him and to be a part of what he wants. And that's always more glorious and more better than what I thought my plans was going to be. And if you look back, a lot of times the plateaus and the mountaintops get higher and better. There's more people, there's more things, there's so much more that is brighter than those past relationships and those past things. At the time, it is devastating. If we look and we see the disciples left Yeshua with a quickness. They couldn't get away from him. They couldn't deny him quick enough. Even Kiefer, Peter, right? He's like, oh, but he ran like a scalded dog, if you will. But our life, when it's threatened, so many times we just want to get away. We want to save and salvage even our face. right? We want to be what we're perceived to be. We want to be that guy. And there's nothing that the flesh wants more to be in that realm. But sometimes being that guy takes away from being what Yahweh has made us. So we'll go and do one more before we close up. He went on, what comes out of a person is what defiles them, for it is within them, out of a person's heart. Now, a lot of the others will tell you this is about food and those type of things, and they use that. But if we read what it's talking about, it's what comes out of us, what defiles us. And what I would submit to you, what comes out of our mouth, what we think on will come out. So if we sit there and think all these devious things up, eventually it's going to come out. It's going to come out of our mouth because we have spent a week of telling and thinking of this. So it's going to come out. We've devised it. We put it together. The enemy may have helped, but that has no way of saying that's okay, right? For it is within him, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. And this is what becomes of that, right? We can see clearly what he says becomes of this. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly, in whatever order they come. But we have to know what Yahweh says is best for us. We as children think we got it figured out. We think we can go do what we want, cash our check, and go live our life and do anything we want to do. But eventually that can become a terrible demise to us. But when we realize what he says, and LGBT and all this, and everybody says love is love, but he says what love is. And he's the creator, and he's the one that made it. So with all that being said, we have to go with what he says, or we're just doing our own thing. All these evils come from inside and defile the person. So it eventually comes, or it starts from the inside, the heart, the mind, our thoughts, and what we think, and how we perceive and what we do with that situation. And what we do with that situation may take months later, and it may take weeks. But if we're not careful, what becomes of those situations is what becomes us. And I would submit to you that we do not want to become any of these, right? The sexual immorality, the theft, the murdering, the adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. And arrogance can be another one. Folly, it all goes together, and it all becomes whom we are. So let us go forth and be conquerors and be more of what Yahweh created us to be. Because he did no wrongs. He didn't create you or me to be anything other than spectacular, I believe. He wants our life to be abundant. He wants our life to be tremendous, and I believe awesomely for the world to see. Now, the world will not perceive that as we perceive that. They will hate us. They will not like us. They will not want to be a part of what we're doing. But those whom are called, those who want to be restored, those who want to be a part of his kingdom, will gladly come and hear. My sheep hear my voice. Those with the eyes will see it. Those with the ears will hear it. So that's the ones that I believe that we are ultimately going after, and we need to stay to be a part of. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great and wonderful Sabbath. Thank you for having me here. It's a wonderful, wonderful time. Shalom. Yahweh bless you all. Shalom.